Ambassador Zethkar walked through the great halls of the Galactic Council building. His blue skin showed the worry lines that had grown deeper over the past few weeks. In his forearms, he carried data tablets filled with reports that made no sense. Reports that scared him. The council chamber was full today. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats. Some had fur, some had scales. Others looked like walking trees, but they all shared the same confused look on their faces. Zethkar stepped up to the speaking platform. The room grew quiet. "Fellow council members," he began, his voice echoing through the vast space. "We have a problem. A big problem." He activated the hologram display. Images of ancient ruins appeared in the air above the council floor. The structures were massive, built from black stone that seemed to eat light. Most importantly, they all bore the same symbol, a closed fist surrounded by 12 bright stars. "These ruins have been found on 17 different worlds," Zethkar continued. "Our best scientists say they are at least 50,000 years old, maybe older, but here is what makes no sense. They were all built by the same people." A reptilian council member named Seth hissed softly. "Impossible. No species traveled between stars that long ago. We barely had fire 50,000 years back." "That is what we thought too," Zethkar replied. "But the evidence does not lie. The building materials are identical. The construction methods are the same. Even the symbols are carved in exactly the same way." Dr. Vexani, the council's head scientist, stood up. Her 6 eyes blinked in sequence as she spoke. "We have tested the ruins with every tool we have. The age readings are correct. But whoever built these places had technology we still do not understand. The stone itself has been changed at the molecular level. It should not be possible with any known science." The chamber filled with worried whispers. Species that had lived for thousands of years looked nervous. Finally, an old voice spoke from the back of the room. "I know that symbol." Everyone turned. Elder historian Kreloth slowly walked forward. He was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived people. His gray skin was covered in wrinkles, and he moved with the careful steps of someone who had seen too much. "Elder Kreloth," Zethkar said with respect, "please share what you know." The old being reached the center of the chamber. His ancient eyes stared at the hologram for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone heard him clearly. "The fist and 12 stars," he said slowly. "I have seen this before. In the oldest text, in the forbidden archives. It is the mark of the Terrans." The chamber exploded with noise. Council members shouted questions and protests. The word Terrans was spoken in dozens of different languages, but always with the same tone of disbelief. Zethkar raised his hands for silence. "Elder, please explain. Who were these Terrans?" Kreloth closed his eyes as if remembering something painful. "They were the first wanderers, the species that learned to travel between stars before anyone else. Before us, before the Zephyrians, before even the ancient builders." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "The old texts call them the Endless Fighters. They say the Terrans could live anywhere. Hot worlds, cold worlds, worlds with poison air, it did not matter. They adapted to everything, made every challenge into a strength. Where are they now?" asked Dr. Vexani. "If they were so advanced, why have we never met them?" Kreloth opened his eyes. The fear in them was clear. Because they were too dangerous to exist. The texts say they did not just fight wars. They became war itself. When cornered, their rage was so terrible that even the Void Hunters ran from them. Several council members gasped. The Void Hunters were legends themselves, ancient monsters that ate entire star systems. The idea that anything could scare them seemed impossible. "The Alliance of old decided the Terrans were too dangerous," Kreloth continued. "So they did what had to be done. They drove them out, beyond the galaxy's edge, into the empty dark between stars." "But that was just a story, right?" Seth asked hopefully. "Ancient myths to scare children?" Before Kreloth could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the chamber. Emergency lights flashed red. A young technician ran into the room, his breathing heavy. "Council members, you need to see this right away!" The hologram display changed. Now it showed a view of deep space, beyond the galaxy's outer rim. At first there was nothing but darkness and distant stars. Then the image zoomed in, ships, thousands of them, maybe millions. They were arranged in perfect formation, moving through space like a vast metal river. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Their design was smooth but deadly. like weapons that had learned to fly. "When did our long-range sensors detect this fleet?" Sethkar demanded. 17 minutes ago, the technician replied. "They just appeared. Like they came out of nowhere." Dr. Vexani was studying the readings. Their technology signature is completely unknown. The energy output from their engines should not be possible. And look at their formation, it is too perfect. No organic crew could maintain such precision. "Zoom in on the lead ship," Kreloth said quietly. The image focused on the largest vessel at the front of the fleet. It was massive, easily 10 times bigger than the Council's largest warship. Along its side, painted in silver against the dark metal, was a symbol that made everyone's blood turn cold. A closed fist, surrounded by 12 stars. The chamber fell completely silent. The only sound was the quiet hum of the life support systems. "Computer," Sethkar said in a shaky voice. "Calculate the fleet's current trajectory." The computer's calm voice filled the silence. "Fleet is heading toward the core worlds. Current speed is 0.7 light speed. Estimated arrival time at the capital system is 3 standard cycles, 3 days. The most powerful fleet anyone had ever seen would reach the heart of galactic civilization in 3 days. Are they responding to our communication attempts?" Dr. Vexani asked. The technician checked his instruments. "No response to any frequency. We have tried every language in our databases. They are not even acknowledging that we exist." Kreloth walked closer to the hologram. His ancient face was filled with a fear older than most civilizations. "The texts say that when the Terrans were driven out, their last message to the galaxy was a promise. They swore that one day they would return, and when they did, there would be a reckoning for what was done to them." "But that was 50,000 years ago," Seth protested. "Even if some survived, they would be different now. Changed, maybe they forgot about the old times." "Look at their ships," Kreloth replied. "Look at how they move together. Look at that symbol. Does this look like a people who forgot anything?" The council members stared at the display in growing horror. The fleet continued its steady advance toward the core worlds. Each ship moved with purpose, like part of a single vast mind. "What do we do?" someone whispered. Sethkar looked around the chamber. Fear was on every face. These were beings from species that had conquered worlds, that had fought wars across the galaxy. But now they looked like children afraid of the dark. "We prepare," he said finally. "We send messages to every world, every fleet, every military base. The Terrans are coming home, and we are about to learn if the old stories were true." The alarms continued to ring as the council members began to panic. Outside the chamber, across the galaxy, long-range sensors tracked the approaching fleet. On millions of worlds, people looked up at the stars and wondered what was coming for them. In the depths of space, the Terran fleet moved forward with the patience of inevitability itself. Communications Officer Veltar had worked at the remote monitoring station Epsilon 7 for 12 years. It was boring work, listening to empty space for signals that almost never came. The station sat at the very edge of known space, where the galaxy ended and the dark void began. But today was different. Today his instruments were picking up something impossible. "Computer, run another analysis on the incoming transmission," Veltar said. His 3 eyes focused on the display screens around him. The computer processed the signal for the 15th time. "Analysis complete. The transmission contains structured language patterns, but the language is not in any database." Attempting partial translation. Veltar watched as words slowly appeared on his screen. Most of it was still gibberish, but some phrases came through clearly. "Coming home. Remember our children. What they did to us. Make them pay." A chill ran down Veltar's spine. He had heard the stories spreading through the galaxy about the ancient fleet. Could this transmission be from them? "Computer, trace the source of this signal. Signal originates from the approaching unknown fleet. Estimated transmission power suggests the source is the largest vessel in the formation." Veltar's hands shook as he recorded the transmission. This was the first communication anyone had detected from the mysterious ships. He needed to send this to the Galactic Council immediately. Meanwhile, on the ancient archive world of Thexmore, Dr. Shiara was having the best day of her research career. The young archaeologist had been studying the Terran ruins for months, trying to understand why they were built. She stood in the middle of the largest ruin on the planet. The black stone walls rose high above her, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Her team of graduate students worked carefully around the site, documenting everything. Professor Shiara, called her assistant, an eager young man named Corvex. You need to see this. She walked over to where Corvex was working. He had uncovered a section of wall that was different from the others. Instead of symbols, this wall was covered in images. Pictures carved into the stone with incredible detail. The first image showed beings that looked almost familiar. They stood on two legs, had two arms, and faces that were expressive and intelligent. But there was something about them that made Shiara's skin crawl. They looked dangerous in a way that was hard to explain. Are these the Terrans? Corvex asked. I think so, Shiara replied, studying the carvings. Look at the next image. The second carving showed the same beings, but now they were surrounded by other species. Many species, all working together against the two-legged ones. Ships filled the sky, raining fire down on cities. The third image was the most disturbing. It showed the two-legged beings fighting back. They were vastly outnumbered, but they fought with a fury that seemed to leap off the stone itself. Even carved in ancient rock, their desperation and rage was clear. Professor, whispered another student, look at this. She turned to see her student pointing at something near the floor. Carved in smaller text, repeated over and over, was the same phrase in the ancient Terran language. We will remember. Dr. Shiara felt her stomach drop. Computer, translate this phrase to Galactic Standard. The translation appeared on her portable screen. We will remember. This isn't a settlement, she said slowly, the truth dawning on her. This is a memorial. These ruins mark places where they made their last stand. She looked around the chamber with new eyes. Suddenly, the black stone walls didn't look like architecture anymore. They looked like gravestones. Corvex, send all of this data to the Galactic Historical Database immediately. Every university, every research station needs to see this. Professor, what does this mean? Shiara stared at the carved images of the desperate battle. It means the stories were true. The Terrans didn't disappear naturally. They were hunted, driven out, and they swore to remember. Within hours, Dr. Shiara's discovery was spreading across the galactic communication networks. On thousands of worlds, people watched the images of the ancient battle. Many recognized some of the attacking species from the carvings. They looked very much like the founding members of the current Galactic Confederation. The panic started on the core worlds and spread outward like a wave. If the Terrans were returning, and if they remembered what had been done to them, then the galaxy was in serious trouble. At the Galactic Defense Command, Admiral Correx studied the latest reports from his scout ships. The approaching fleet had done something impossible. They had accelerated past the speed of light without using any known form of faster-than-light travel. How is this possible? He demanded from his science officer. We don't know, sir. Our instruments show they're somehow bending space around their ships. It's like they're pulling themselves forward instead of pushing. Admiral Correx looked at the tactical display. When the fleet had first been detected, it stretched across several light years. Now, as better sensors got a clearer picture, the true size was becoming apparent. Computer, give me a full count of the enemy vessels. Unable to provide exact count. Estimated minimum 2 million combat vessels. Estimated maximum 7 million combat vessels. The bridge fell silent. The entire Galactic Defense Fleet had maybe 50,000 ships. Even if every species contributed their full military, they would still be outnumbered 20 to 1. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're getting reports from monitoring stations across the outer rim. The fleet is sending out scout ships, fast ones. They're mapping our defenses. On the command vessel of the Terran fleet, Captain Sarah Chen reviewed the data her scouts had been gathering. The galaxy had changed a lot in 10,000 years, but not in ways that impressed her. The same species that had hunted her ancestors were still in charge. They had grown soft and comfortable, building their civilization on the graves of her people. They had forgotten that actions have consequences, but humans never forgot anything. Sarah was tall, even by human standards, with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much. Like all humans in the fleet, she had been born in the dark void between galaxies. Her people had spent 10,000 years adapting to the most hostile environment imaginable. It had made them stronger. Report, Commander, she said to her second-in-command. Ma'am, we've mapped their defensive positions. Their technology is advanced, but it follows predictable patterns. Their tactics are by the book. No creativity, no adaptation, Sarah nodded. What about their governments? 17 of the species that participated in the purge are still in power. They've grown fat and lazy. Their military commanders have never fought a real war. And the innocent species? Mixed in with the guilty ones, ma'am. As usual, Sarah walked to the forward viewing port. Ahead of her, the galaxy sprawled across space like a spiral of lights. Somewhere in that collection of stars was Earth, the homeworld her people had never been allowed to forget. Ma'am, the communications officer called. We're intercepting transmissions from the galaxy. They know we're coming. Some of their scholars have figured out what happened to us. Good, Sarah said. I want them to know. I want them to understand exactly what they're about to face. She turned to address her bridge crew. 10,000 years ago, they tried to exterminate us. They thought humans were too dangerous to exist. They were wrong about one thing, though. Ma'am, her commander asked. Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. They thought we were dangerous then. They have no idea what we've become. Behind her, through the viewing port, the galaxy continued to grow larger. In the distance, the lights of billions of worlds glowed like jewels. Many of those worlds were innocent. Some were not. Soon all of them would learn the difference between justice and mercy, and they would learn that humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting both. The human fleet stopped at the edge of the Helix Nebula, just 3 light years from the core worlds. For 2 days they sat in perfect formation, silent as death itself. Every ship in the galaxy held its breath, waiting. Then on the 3rd day they finally spoke. The message came on all frequencies at once, broadcast to every world in the galaxy simultaneously. The voice that delivered it was female, calm, and spoke in perfect galactic standard. We are the children of Terra. We are the survivors of the Purge. We have come home. President Galather of the Galactic Confederation sat in the emergency council session, his pale blue skin showing the stress marks of sleepless nights. Around him, the leaders of 47 species argued and shouted, but he could barely hear them. All his attention was focused on the words coming from the speakers. For 10,000 years we have waited in the dark between stars. We have grown strong in places where nothing should be able to live. We have remembered every name, every world, every species that participated in our extinction. The voice paused, letting that sink in across the galaxy. Those who ordered the purge, those who carried it out, and those who benefited from it have 3 standard cycles to surrender themselves for judgment. This is your only warning. This offer will not be repeated. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in chaos. This is insane, shouted General Vorthak, his reptilian features twisted with anger. They can't just demand we hand over our governments. The purge happened 50,000 years ago, added Ambassador Cleeth. Everyone involved is dead. President Galather raised his hand for silence. Elder Kreloth, you know the old histories better than anyone. What exactly was the purge? The ancient historian looked even older than before. His hands shook as he accessed his memory files. The purge was a coordinated military action taken by 17 species. They identified the humans as a potential threat to galactic stability and decided to eliminate them before they could become too powerful. But why? Dr. Vexani asked. What made them so dangerous? Kreloth's voice was barely a whisper. They adapted too quickly. Every time someone found a way to hurt them, they learned from it and became stronger. They turned their weaknesses into advantages. The Alliance believed that if humans were allowed to spread across the galaxy, they would eventually dominate everything. So they tried to kill them all, President Galather said. Not just kill them. They hunted down every human colony, poisoned their worlds, and chased the survivors to the edge of the galaxy. The last human transmission before they disappeared was a single message. We will remember. We will return. And there will be justice. The chamber fell quiet. Outside, across the galaxy, people watched their screens in fear and confusion. President Galather activated the diplomatic channels. Unknown human vessels, this is President Galather of the Galactic Confederation. We wish to establish peaceful contact and discuss your demands. The response came immediately, transmitted from the lead human ship. President Galather, we have reviewed your historical records. Your species was not involved in the purge. Neither were 23 other species currently in your confederation. We have no quarrel with the innocent. Then perhaps we can find a peaceful solution to this situation. There is no situation to solve, President. There is only justice to be served. We will now demonstrate why the Alliance feared us, and why they were right to do so. Before anyone could respond, the sensors detected movement from the human fleet. A single ship, smaller than the others but still larger than anything in the Galactic Navy, detached from the formation. It's heading for Kareth Prime, reported the sensor. Operator. Everyone in the council chamber knew about Kareth Prime. It was the most heavily defended military station in the galaxy. 16 species had contributed to its construction over thousands of years. It was considered absolutely impregnable. Send a warning to Kareth Prime, President Galather ordered. Tell them to prepare for attack. On Kareth Prime, Admiral Zektor received the warning with disbelief. His station had enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The approaching human ship looked tiny by comparison. All weapons target the approaching vessel, he commanded. Fire when it reaches maximum range. The station's massive particle cannons opened fire when the human ship was still light minutes away. The beams should have vaporized anything in their path. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ship simply wasn't there anymore. Where did it go? Admiral Zektor demanded. Unknown, sir. It just disappeared from our sensors. Then alarms started ringing throughout the station. The human ship had somehow appeared inside their defensive perimeter, so close that the station's weapons couldn't target it effectively. But the ship didn't fire any weapons. Instead, it began broadcasting a signal directly into the station's power core. What are they doing? Admiral Zektor asked his science officer. Sir, they're generating some kind of gravitational field. It's affecting the station's structural integrity. The effect was subtle at first. The station began to vibrate slightly. Then the vibrations grew stronger. Within minutes, the entire massive structure was shaking itself apart. Evacuate all personnel, Admiral Zektor ordered, but it was too late. The station didn't explode. It simply folded in on itself like a piece of paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. In 17 minutes, the most powerful military installation in the galaxy had been reduced to a ball of compressed metal and debris. The human ship sat motionless next to the wreckage for a moment, then vanished again. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the destruction in stunned silence. The humans had destroyed Kareth Prime without firing a single weapon. They had turned the station's own mass against itself. But then something unexpected happened. The human fleet began broadcasting on open channels, sending cultural transmissions to every world in the galaxy. Music filled the airwaves. Not the harsh sounds of war, but beautiful, complex melodies that spoke of joy and sorrow and hope. Art followed the music, paintings and sculptures and poetry that showed a people who had not let darkness destroy their souls. On the monitoring station Epsilon 7, Veltar listened to a human song about home and family. The melody was haunting and beautiful, nothing like what he had expected from a species bent on revenge. Computer, he said softly, analyze these cultural transmissions. What do they tell us about the humans? The computer processed the data for several minutes. Analysis indicates a highly advanced civilization with strong emphasis on individual creativity, family bonds, and moral philosophy. Despite evidence of military capability, the cultural markers suggest a people more interested in creation than destruction. Dr. Shiara was studying the human transmissions from her laboratory on Thexmore. The poetry especially fascinated her. It spoke of loss and exile, but also of growth and learning. These were not the words of mindless conquerors. One poem in particular caught her attention. We left as children, afraid and alone, cast out from all we had known. We return as guardians, tested and strong to right what was wrong. They're not just warriors, she realized. They're something much more complex. Back on the human command ship, Captain Sarah Chen watched the galaxy's reaction to their cultural broadcasts. Many worlds were beginning to understand that the humans were not simple destroyers. Ma'am, her communications officer reported, we're receiving thousands of messages from across the galaxy. Many species are asking for dialogue. Some are even apologizing for what their ancestors did. And the 17 species that participated in the purge? Mixed reactions. 7 are trying to organize a military alliance against us. 4 are offering to negotiate. 6 are preparing to evacuate their leadership. Sarah nodded. As expected. Some will try to fight. Some will try to run. A few might even try to do what's right. She walked to the forward viewing screen, where the lights of the galaxy spread out before her. In the distance, she could see the glow of Earth's sun, still shining after all these years. "Open a channel to the entire galaxy," she commanded. When the channel was active, she spoke clearly and calmly. "People of the galaxy, we are not your enemies unless you choose to make us so. We have returned not for conquest, but for justice. Those who participated in the murder of our people will face judgment. Those who did not have nothing to fear from us," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "We know you fear us. Your ancestors were right to fear us, but not for the reasons they thought. They feared our potential for violence. What they should have feared was our potential for justice." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate the difference between the two. The humans began their judgment not with massive fleets or planet-killing weapons, but with something far more terrifying: perfect precision. On the industrial world of Vex Prime, Governor Malthorn woke up to find his security detail missing. Not dead, not unconscious, simply gone. The surveillance cameras showed empty corridors where armed guards should have been standing. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of what had happened. By noon, half his government had vanished. By evening, he was alone in his compound, surrounded by empty rooms and silent hallways. The same thing was happening across 17 different star systems. Officials who had inherited power from the species that participated in the purge were disappearing without a trace. Not their families, not their innocent staff, only those directly connected to the old crimes. Admiral Vex Thor of the Hegemony Defense Force was not going to wait for the humans to come for him. He gathered a coalition fleet from 12 different species, over 3,000 ships of various sizes and capabilities. "We will show these humans that the galaxy has grown strong in their absence," he declared to his assembled captains. "They may have superior technology, but we have superior numbers." The coalition fleet met the humans at the Crimson Gate, an ancient jump point between star systems. Admiral Vex Thor expected a massive battle, ship against ship, fleet against fleet. Instead, he got a demonstration of why the ancient alliance had feared humanity so much. The human ships moved like nothing Vex Thor had ever seen. They phased in and out of normal space, appearing in multiple locations at once. His weapons officers reported targeting locks on the same human vessel from 3 different angles. Impossible unless the ship was somehow existing in several places simultaneously. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead human vessel," Vex Thor ordered. 3,000 ships opened fire at once. The space around the human command ship lit up with energy beams, projectiles, and explosive missiles. When the light faded, the ship was gone. Then it appeared directly behind Vex Thor's flagship. "Sir," his tactical officer screamed, "they're right behind us." "How did they get behind us?" But the human ship didn't fire its weapons. Instead, it broadcast a message directly to Admiral Vex Thor's personal communication device. "Admiral, you have 30 seconds to order your ships to stand down. This is your only warning." Vex Thor's pride wouldn't let him surrender. "All ships, turn and engage. Show these ghosts what real warriors look like." What happened next became known as the Battle of Crimson Gate, though calling it a battle was generous. It lasted exactly 43 minutes. The human ships didn't fight like any military force Vex Thor had ever encountered. They moved through space like dancers, appearing and disappearing at will. When they did attack, they struck with surgical precision, disabling engines and weapon systems without killing crews. But the most terrifying thing was their coordination. 3 million human ships moved as if they shared a single mind. Every action was perfectly timed, every maneuver flawlessly executed. When it was over, Vex Thor's coalition fleet was completely disabled. Not destroyed, the humans could have killed everyone easily, but rendered helpless. 3,000 ships drifted in space, their crews alive but their vessels powerless. The human command ship appeared next to Vex Thor's flagship one final time. The message was simple: "War is over, Admiral. Consider this mercy." Then they were gone, leaving the coalition fleet to be rescued by Galactic Emergency Services. But the humans' true masterstroke wasn't military. While the galaxy focused on the Battle of Crimson Gate, something else was happening across thousands of worlds. On the trading planet of Nexus 7th, a merchant named Kefral was serving customers at his small shop when one of them, a being he had known for years, did something unexpected. "Kefral," the customer said quietly, "I need to tell you something. My name isn't Vortex. It's actually Sarah Chen. I'm human." Kefrel stared at the being he had known as Vortex for over a decade. The shape was different, but now that he looked closely, he could see something underneath. The way she moved, the way she thought, the quiet strength that had always made him feel safe in her presence. "You're human?" he whispered. "My people have been living among you for generations, watching, learning, waiting." She paused, her disguised features showing real sadness. "We never wanted this to happen. We hoped the galaxy would change on its own." Similar scenes were playing out on planets across the galaxy. Humans who had been hiding in plain sight for millennia began revealing themselves. They had been teachers, doctors, merchants, farmers. They had been friends, neighbors, and trusted members of their communities. The revelation sent shockwaves through galactic society. Humans hadn't just survived the purge. They had been living among other species all along, protecting and serving the very civilizations built on their people's graves. Captain Sarah Chen watched these revelations unfold from her command ship. The psychological impact was exactly what she had hoped for. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humans weren't alien invaders. They were part of the galactic community and always had been. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. President Galather wants to speak with you directly." "Put him through." President Galather appeared on the main screen, his blue features showing exhaustion and worry. "Captain Chen, I presume?" "President, how can I help you?" "Your people have made their point. The galaxy understands your capabilities, but this campaign of judgment, it's causing panic on thousands of worlds. Innocent people are suffering from the economic disruption and fear." Sarah nodded. "That's regrettable, but not our intention. We're only targeting those connected to the purge. But how can you be sure you're targeting the right people? It was so long ago. Records might be incomplete or wrong." Sarah's expression hardened. "President, we've had 10,000 years to research this. We know exactly who was responsible and who wasn't. We know which species participated willingly, which were coerced, and which tried to help us. Our records are very complete." She leaned forward. "But I understand your concern. Let me offer a solution." The screen changed to show a view of space near Earth's solar system. A massive structure hung in orbit around the sun, larger than any space station ever built. "This is Terra Prima, our true home base. We invite the Galactic Council to send representatives here. We'll open our historical archives and show you exactly what happened during the purge. Every world, every battle, every decision. You can judge for yourselves whether our actions are justified." President Galather stared at the massive structure. That's your homeworld? We thought Earth was destroyed during the purge. Earth was never touched. We've been guarding it for 10,000 years, waiting for the right time to reveal it." Sarah's voice grew warmer. "President, we don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to protect it. But we can't do that while the systems that created the purge are still in power. And if the Council agrees to your invitation, then we can discuss the future. A better future, where strength protects the weak instead of exploiting them." The transmission ended, leaving President Galather staring at an empty screen. Around him, the council chamber buzzed with whispered conversations. In space, the human fleet continued its patient advance toward the core worlds. But now their purpose was clearer. They hadn't returned for conquest or revenge. They had returned to fix what was broken. The question was whether the galaxy would let them, or force them to do it the hard way. The delegation from the Galactic Council approached Terra Prima in a state of awe and terror. The structure orbiting Earth's sun was not just massive, it was impossible. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, its architecture defying every law of physics they understood. President Galather led the delegation, accompanied by representatives from 20 species, including several whose ancestors had participated in the purge. Elder Kreloth had insisted on coming, despite his advanced age. "How long has this been here?" Dr. Vexani whispered as their shuttle approached the docking bay. Captain Sarah Chen's voice came over the communication system. "Welcome to Terra Prima. This station has been here for 8,000 years. We built it to watch over our birth world and monitor the galaxy." As they docked, the delegation saw something that made their blood run cold. Through the transparent walls of the docking bay, they could see Earth hanging in space like a blue and green jewel. It was beautiful, pristine, and completely surrounded by defensive installations that could have destroyed any fleet in the galaxy. Sarah Chen met them at the airlock. In person, she was tall and imposing, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to see everything. But her manner was polite, almost gentle. "Welcome to our home," she said simply. "Please follow me." She led them through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were covered with images, not decorations, but historical records. Pictures of ancient Earth, of the first human colonies, of the species that had welcomed humanity into the galactic community. Then the images changed. Pictures of attacks, of burning colonies, of human children fleeing in terror. "This is the complete record of the Purge," Sarah explained as they walked. "Every world, every battle, every atrocity. We've preserved it all." Elder Kreloth stopped in front of one image. It showed his own species' ships firing on a human hospital ship. His ancient face crumpled with shame. "I remember this," he whispered. "I was young then, serving on one of those ships. We were told it was a military transport. It was carrying children to safety," Sarah said quietly. "Sick children." The attacking forces knew this. President Galather felt sick. How many died during the Purge? 47 billion humans. Entire generations wiped out. Sarah's voice remained calm, but her eyes showed the weight of that loss. The survivors were driven beyond the galaxy's edge, into spaces so hostile that most species would have died within days. They entered a vast chamber filled with holographic displays. Each one showed a different human colony in the void between galaxies. The conditions looked impossible. Worlds of ice and poison, space stations built inside asteroids, people living in environments that should have killed them. "But you survived," Dr. Vexani observed. "We did more than survive. We adapted. We grew stronger. We learned to live where nothing else could." Sarah gestured to the displays. "Every challenge made us better. Every hardship taught us something new." "And you spent all this time planning revenge?" President Galather asked. Sarah shook her head. "No. We spent this time learning how to build something better." She led them to another chamber, this one filled with plans and designs. Cities that could exist in any environment. Technologies that could heal poisoned worlds. Social systems that protected the weak and encouraged the strong. "We've had 10,000 years to think about what we want the galaxy to become. Not human-dominated, but truly free. Where species help each other instead of fighting over resources." "And if the guilty species refuse to accept your judgment?" President Galather asked. Before Sarah could answer, alarms began ringing throughout Terra Prima. The massive station shuddered slightly. "Something that should have been impossible given its size, ma'am." A human officer rushed into the chamber. "We have an emergency. The Void Hunters are back." The delegation looked confused, but Sarah's face went pale. "How many?" "Hundreds of thousands, ma'am." "Maybe millions. They're coming from dark space, just like in the old stories." Sarah turned to the delegation. "I'm sorry, but this conversation will have to wait. We have a bigger problem now." She led them quickly to the observation deck. Through the transparent walls, they could see space itself seeming to tear open. Dark shapes poured through the gaps, ships that seemed to absorb light itself, creatures of darkness and hunger. President Galather had heard the old legends, but seeing them made his blood freeze. The Void Hunters were real and they were back. "Computer," Sarah commanded, "send emergency signals to all human ships. Code Omega. Protect all inhabited worlds regardless of species." "Ma'am," the computer responded. "That includes worlds whose governments are still hostile to us." "I said all inhabited worlds." President Galather stared at her. "You're going to protect the same species that tried to exterminate you?" Sarah looked at him with surprise, as if the question itself was strange. "Of course. They're still people, still families and children and dreams. The fact that some of their leaders are criminals doesn't change that." Across the galaxy, the human fleet moved into action with the same perfect coordination they had shown in battle. But now they were moving to defend, not attack. Human ships took position between the Void Hunters and every populated world, regardless of politics or history. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Void Hunters were creatures of pure hunger, seeking to devour entire star systems. They had no tactics beyond overwhelming consumption, but humans had spent 10,000 years learning to fight impossible odds. Where other species would have seen certain death, humans saw just another problem to solve. They coordinated across light years of space, adapted to Void Hunter tactics in real time, and demonstrated something that awed even their former enemies. Humans fought hardest when they were protecting others. On the agricultural world of Kelmtar, populated by one of the species that had participated in the purge, the local population watched in amazement as human ships threw themselves between their world and the approaching darkness. The humans took terrible losses but never retreated. Admiral Vexthor, the same leader who had opposed the humans at Crimson Gate, watched from his disabled flagship as human vessels saved his homeworld from destruction. When a Void Hunter creature broke through their lines and headed straight for the planet's surface, a single human ship rammed it, sacrificing itself to protect millions of beings who had been trying to kill humans just days before. The battle lasted for 3 days. When it was over, the Void Hunters had been driven back into dark space, but the cost had been enormous. Thousands of human ships were destroyed, millions of human lives lost protecting people who had hated them, but they had done it. Every inhabited world in the galaxy was still intact. In the aftermath, something remarkable happened. Representatives from across the galaxy began arriving at Terra Prima, not as prisoners or enemies, but as supplicants. They came to offer their apologies, their service, their partnership in building something better. Admiral Vexthor himself was among them, his proud bearing replaced by humble recognition of what he had witnessed. "We were wrong," he said simply when he met with Captain Chen. "About humans, about strength, about what it means to be powerful. You could have let the Void Hunters destroy us. You could have used the attack as cover to eliminate your enemies. Instead, you saved us all." Sarah nodded. "That's what strength is for. Not to dominate others, but to protect those who can't protect themselves." The Galactic Confederation dissolved within months, replaced by something new, the Terran Compact. Not a human empire, but a true alliance where humanity served as both guardian and guide. The guilty species faced their judgment, but it was not the revenge many had expected. Those who accepted responsibility for the purge were given the chance to make amends through service. Those who refused found themselves isolated as the galaxy moved forward without them. President Galathor, now serving as the Compact's first non-human administrator, often reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was still full of different species with different needs and wants, but now there was someone watching over them all, someone who had learned through suffering that true strength meant protecting the innocent. Elder Kreloth spent his final years working with human historians to ensure the complete truth of the purge was preserved, not as propaganda, but as a reminder of what happened when fear ruled over wisdom. The galaxy's greatest fortune, he wrote in his final report, was not that humanity disappeared. It was that when they returned, they chose to be guardians instead of conquerors. On Terra Prima, Sarah Chen stood once again on the observation deck, looking out at Earth. Her homeworld was finally safe, protected by children who had grown strong in darkness and chosen to bring light back to the galaxy. The human race had been lost once, feared, and driven away. But they had returned not as the monsters their enemies had claimed they were, but as something far more dangerous to those who would harm the innocent. They had returned as justice itself, and the galaxy was better for it.